this is the first movie that I had done with extensive underwater work. So I was a novice and new to it, and probably didn't know what I was doing half the time. But as you probably know, communicating underwater is extremely challenging. Radio waves don't go through water. So you have to figure out you can't, it's not like you're in a talkie underwater going, hey, swim past that anchor and come over, So instead you have to communicate with wet boards, and you have to communicate with essentially what is kind of like a giant underwater speaker that vibrates with your voice. So so I have to be above water so that they can hear me.
Okay.
And you speak into a talkie and it goes down through a wire and it vibrates so that all 20, 30 people can hear it, and they all kind of go, so yes. So there's a lot of hand signals, wet boards. And I think the biggest thing is preparation. We were just had to be so prepared, because everything takes 4 or 5 times longer than it would otherwise because of the communication issues. I mean, to literally swim back and forth can be like 20 minutes of trying to sort of figure things out. So we were very prepared. But I think the biggest thing is that, Tanya and Nate and Emerson, our cast, were so gung-ho and willing to suffer so much that we were able to shoot a lot. And the water is very cold. And what I didn't know was that there's a direct correlation between how much footage you can actually shoot and the water temperature, because, for health and safety reasons, hypothermia, et cetera, there can only be a certain amount of time that an actor can be under the water, as it should be.
Yeah.
But that just means they have to have the right attitude. You have to have the right planning. It was very, very challenging and complex and sort of insane. And we were always kind of on the edge of, are we going too far with this? Should we pull back? And we shot in 4 different water environments to get the look for the movie. So there was pools, there was nature, there was tanks, all sort of to try to integrate all the footage together, to make you feel like you're not seeing all of the different environments. So you had to match the visual underwater environments to each location, so that when you were shooting tight on Tanya in the pool, which sometimes we did, that wall matched nature, which we went, into the world, into a nature preserve called Sodwana in South Africa, where the real sharks were. So we had to match those walls, so you never felt like, oh, they're in the pool and now they're in nature. So we did our best to try to work all that out. It was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun.
And it makes it work so much better that you could see. I mean, the actors are in the water. It's nice to see that. It's nice to see them involved. It's not. I mean, I don't know how many stunt doubles were used, but for the most part, you can see it's just the actors in there, and that sells the believability of it. It really gets you more invested, I would say. So it's cool that they were really down to get in the water and be cold.
Yeah,
during all that time.
They were, and thank you for that. And I agree. I think that when you pull back to a certain amount of feet away from an actor underwater in a scuba suit, frankly, they all look exactly the same. So unless you're close and you can see through that mask, you really can get away with doubles. And we did obviously have doubles, but you lose the cinematic storytelling quality when you're that far away, because you can't see eyes, you can't see faces, you can't see reactions. So, we really put a lot of effort into being close, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
And then being, trying to match that to either the actor or the doubles when they were moving farther away. So, it's a real puzzle. It's a real puzzle, and I'm lucky that I had, these actors just all, like the crew. I think that ethos sort of rubbed off, and they just, they went the extra mile for everything for this movie. We were very fortunate.
So in the first Deep Blue Sea, Rennie Harlan would say like LL Cool J was like the best crew member because he was always gung ho to get into everything. So it sounds like you just had a whole team of LL Cool Js. Everyone just willing to get to grips with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wish we could have, maybe when we get more budget, we can bring them back and do the shark fin hat remake or something like that.
That's all this film was missing, was an LL Cool J rap at the end. So.
I agree.
This is really random, but that movie Hard Rain, how stressful is it for you to watch that film? All that rain and water and tanks, doesn't that seem? I don't know. I know that's random, but I know shooting with water is tough. But that movie seemed like I don't think I'd want to work on that film. I don't know. What would you have stepped into directing or writing that? As a writer, would you write Hard Rain?
Well, probably.
Yeah.
since it got made. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
Honestly, the now that it's over, I can just look back and just sort of appreciate and like it. I actually have a harder time watching movies that take place inside airplanes because of the nightmares of that was kind of harder. At least in water, there's freedom and openness as opposed to the claustrophobia. Just for me personally, it's
Is that what led to Quarantine 2?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I gotta say that the production design. I mean, you built that set on a lake, correct? It looks beautiful. I mean, the VFX, the play. I mean, you had to do a lot of green blue screen around there to make it work, but that feels like a living, breathing location, and I was immediately on board with it. I thought that was some really excellent builds that y'all did on that. Like, how long was that to put up? Like, I don't know. It just looks great. I just want to tell you that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. We had a great production designer, Franz Lewis, and this is a very low budget Warner movie. I mean, it's like so. We had to be very circumspect about everything that we did. And the biggest thing was, what's the design of this island going to look like? And it's based on a real island off of Colombia that looks, pretty much exactly the same as this island. That was also sitting on a reef, not a great white reef, but a shark reef. And essentially, what I wanted to do was have the ability to shoot 360 as much as possible, because every time you've got a massive blue screen in there, cha-chink, cha-chink, cha-chink. I mean, it's like, it's just like throwing money away. And so because of our limited resources, we had to we had to put a lot of thought into how we were going to design this. So the idea of having a cove where, we wrapped the world around a body of water allowed us to limit the amount of blue screen that we had to use for the open ocean, so that the only shots that we had that were blue screen were when we were shooting this way towards the open ocean through the gap in our lagoon, and then towards the boat. The boat was entirely CG.
Wow.
So except for when it was moving out in the water, and for some of the sequences where you go on it, it was a real boat, obviously. But when it was living in the island world, it was entirely CG. And I think they did a pretty damn good job with that. So, designed for 360, blue screen for open ocean. And every time we shot towards open ocean, it had to be a really important shot, because it's, 10 grand, 5 grand, 10 grand a pop. And that's just for, just putting the world in there. So we really had to pick and choose what, where our eye line, what direction was, to try to stay away from the money shots until we absolutely needed them. And when you pick the movie apart, you can see, how we kind of when we went that direction, it really had to be impactful, and it couldn't be casual. And so that was kind of how we designed it. And then, in terms of, it had to be a playground. So we had to put in, all these decks and piers and walkways that we could blow up. I obviously would have loved to have had 10 times more things to blow up, but, and sink. But our budget, was very tight. So we had to be very, very specific about which building went down, how deep it went down, because dropping buildings into water is hugely expensive. And so we needed that one space to rock around at a certain time and to start sinking, so our two characters in it would be in peril, so we could have the shark come in. It was all like, dastardly orchestrated to get as much fun and pop and chaos out of, a very limited set. And so it's not on a lake, it's actually on a square tank, outdoor tank. And if you drain it, it looks just like a 3 to 7 foot gigantic swimming pool. And then in the center is what's called the deep tank, which is just a giant box, a rectangle that went deep so that we could shoot the deeper stuff in this tank. And we dress the walls of this deeper tank. So while we're shooting in the lab, we could shoot a stunt outside in the deep tank. So it was a pretty cool set, but it's like a big, I think it's 6 acres or something like that.
Wow. Just
very big and square. It was the set that was used for oh my God, what's the female action also set in Africa?
Let's see.
Comic book.
Oh, Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
So in Tomb Raider, there was, I don't know if you remember, but there was it was set in a lagoon with all these junks, and there was this big action sequence where she was running across all these floating junks and platforms and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was like the plane. Was it the plane gag that they had when there was like the big pool of water in the plane, or was that it?
No, it was more like I think it was Hong Kong or someplace in Asia where she had to get from one side of the lagoon to the other, and there was like this massive run and jump through all these,
Got it. Well, it looks great. And what people don't realize is that, like, to have like green or blue screen, you need to have a crane, or you need to have a lift that you're renting, and then you need to add the VFX. So, I mean, it's smart to make it like a U shape, correct? The village that you'll have. You use some low angles, you can really hide a lot with that. And I thought it looked great. It was
Thank you.
And also the beginning shot, what really sold me was when Emma was in the water and the great white comes up. The effects on that, I thought they looked like that right then and there. When I watched it, I knew, like, in the first 30 seconds between Tanya's performance and the shark, I knew I was in safe hands because it just looked excellent. I thought for the budget you had, that's a good looking shark. That's a good looking scene. So how did you approach that? Since it was the first minute, was a lot of care put on that great white because you're like, this is the first opening, or how'd that come about? Because I love that moment.
Thank you. Do you mean specifically the shot where it's very big and sort of circles around her?
Yeah, she tries to push it away. That looks great.
Thanks. The credit really goes to the VFX. you took the words right out of my mouth. And his cohorts at a company called Black Ginger, they're South African VFX company. They've done a lot of big movies, and Mark Block and his team there, including Mr. Your namesake, they're very talented, and they do a lot of work with animals and sharks, given that it's South Africa.